Hi guys, this is Mark from Tribeca Beverage. We're making this video today to show you what the life of a driver at Tribeca Beverage is like, what it's like to get the day started, what they have to do on a daily responsibility, covering everything from the morning to what they do when they get back, as well as how to prepare for the next day. Many of you guys who are either customers or just engaged in a water delivery service maybe don't have such a great perspective of what a driver goes through on a daily basis, and the goal of this video is to inform people whether they want to work for us or whether or not that they want to buy from us, kind of what the driver goes through on a regular basis. So typically the driver arrives anytime between 6:30 to 7 a.m. We really like them there before 7 a.m. Part of a large reason that is, if you guys are familiar with New York City traffic, at a certain point, 7:30, 8 a.m., traffic really ramps up, and if you have to go through Manhattan or to one of the other outer boroughs or even Long Island, it's real important that they get there early so they can dodge a large piece of the traffic that builds up, particularly between that 7:30 to 9 a.m. Before the driver arrives, right, whether it's the night before or even the morning of, the warehouse team is putting together and loading the truck properly to make sure that we can have the routes good and ready to go by the time the driver arrives, or at least to the best of our ability. And that way, when the driver hits the road, he can do so without really having to worry too much about whether or not he has what he needs. Now, fortunately for our business, we really don't sell that many products. It's really just, bottled water and sometimes a few other accessory items. So it's not that complex of an inventory management. However, with that being said, there is a lot of work that goes into even behind the scenes before the driver gets there, which really the warehouse team is tackling. But before they get on the road, there's a couple of things that they really need to tackle. First is making sure that the truck is fully loaded for whatever the route that they have, and usually what we try to provide is a rough inventory of how many stops, what they're going to deliver, and everything they need to know ahead of time so they can get ahead of this before. We always want the driver to double check that they have whatever they need for that route's obligations that day. Once the truck is all checked up in that capacity, the other thing that we really like to make sure is both whether or not they need to stop at the gas station, as well as most of our trucks, if not all of the trucks at this point, minus a few cargo vans, require that the DEF fluid is available in order for the truck to run properly. But once you check the gas, DEF fluid, make sure all the inventory is in the truck, you're really ready to get started. Now, generally, your first stop, unless it's in New Jersey, you're most likely crossing one of the bridges or tunnels to get to where you need to be. So a lot of these drivers, they really need to be prepared with a ton of patience. Driving in New York City can be very stressful. There's a lot to watch out for between parking tickets, red camera lights, speeding camera light or speeding camera tickets. There's many different aspects that the driver needs to be aware of while they're on the road every day, and it can sometimes be difficult to maintain all of this while focusing and doing a good job driving for us. So when we put somebody on the road, ideally they're aware, and it does come with a learning curve a little bit. They're aware of everything that they need to look out for, as the goal is to make sure that they're driving safely, following all the rules, following all the responsibilities, and minimizing any tickets that you might get. So when you arrive at a stop, the goal is to unload whatever amount of bottles, or whether it's a cooler or whatever the case is, unload that from the truck, use the hand truck to bring the bottles over to the target location. Typically it's the front door, but very often if you're a driver, you're often looking for the bottles that we encourage the customers to leave outside. Assuming the customers leave the bottles outside, you'll bring the full bottles to where the empty bottles are, pick them up, and then continue on to the next stop. Unfortunately, just as life happens, every now and then customers live in buildings where they're not able to leave the bottles outside, or for one reason or another, they're not able to take the bottles outside. And on occasion, you might need to knock on the door or call the customer if they don't have their empty bottles out. The empty bottles is also a nice, great confirmation that you are at the right location. Assuming they have the Tribeca Beverage bottles, you can feel confident that you have delivered to the correct home. And particularly when you have a route where all of the customers leave all of their bottles out, it becomes a lot easier to identify. And as you drive with us longer and longer, and some of our more experienced drivers know, they're able to know exactly where to park, know exactly where to deliver, and be in and out of a stop very quickly that maybe on their first attempt might have taken them a little bit longer. So a driver might go in any given day doing anywhere from 25 to 40 plus stops, depending on the area and depending on how dense the route. And the driver themselves might be prepared to have to deliver close to 200 bottles depending on the day. We often, for the driver's sake, heavily discourage customers that involve us walking up past the second floor. On occasion though, there will be a few customers, not many, where you would be required to bring the bottles to the third or fourth floor. The bottles themselves, they weigh close to 43 pounds. You know, if you're driving for us or you're looking to drive for us, it's a ton of weight. You know, and they do have handles, but bringing these up even one flight of steps is difficult. Bringing up a third or a fourth, or, you know, however many flights of steps, makes it that much more worse. And particularly if the order is greater than 2 bottles, that could mean if you get 6 bottles, hypothetically 3 trips up and down a 4th or 5th floor walk up. We generally, at this point, because of the amount of work that is on the drivers, we do our best to stay away from those deliveries, just for the driver's health and well-being. Throughout your 30+ stop day, it's possible that you might encounter a few stairs. The other aspect that the driver really has to deal with, and this is really particularly unique to Manhattan, is you have to be familiar with how the freight elevators operate. And for a lot of stops, you've got a 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. window, usually an hour off for lunch. And if you get there at the wrong time, or you're a couple minutes late, or you show up at their lunch break, you're not able to get to the delivery. And the freight elevator entrance is often not the front door entrance, so you're finding a different address if you're not familiar with the building than what might have been already given to us. The freight elevators sometimes can be one of the biggest challenges that a Manhattan driver, now fortunately it's not as huge of an issue in, you know, the outer boroughs or New Jersey or you know, Florida or California. Sometimes you're in a line, sometimes you're waiting for other people to get ahead of you, and if you've got a heavy, busy day, it's really that important that you kind of make sure you don't fool around, waste any time. You're in, you're out as quick as possible, and particularly when it comes to offices, because space is so tight in New York, it's even that much more important that you get their empty bottles. When you collect all of their empty bottles, particularly for businesses, you might want to ask the staff if there's any bottles not visibly seen. Sometimes they put them in their closet. Often the first month for a driver sometimes can be the hardest and longest, in the sense that there is a little bit of learning curve for where they need to deliver. And then when it comes to the completion of the route, we try to make this as easy as the driver as possible. When you've completed your last stop, you've throughout the day have entered all of the information in a mobile app to update us, even real time, the situation of delivery, whether you were successful or unsuccessful, how many bottles you dropped off, how many bottles you picked up. Actually, very important to any new driver, any existing driver. It's very important for our sake and the customer's sake. We keep a record of how many bottles that the driver picks up. And often, you know, we're not delivering that many bottles at a time, but if it's a very large business, then the counting can be that much more important. But if it's a residential, you might be picking up 4 or 5 bottles at a time, so it's not that overwhelming. Now, I know this is a lot of points to cover, you know, and particularly if you're new with us or you're looking to start with us, it might feel a little bit overwhelming, but you will get the hang of it pretty quickly, and there's not too many aspects. After a couple of days, you kind of learn it. And, you know, it's interesting, right? Because the service that we're offering, water delivery, sounds very simple. And in execution, the actual delivery aspect isn't that difficult, but all the other details that we need to be mindful of is what might make this service a little bit more difficult, on top of the physical stress that your body might experience. Once you finish the route, it's important that you head back home. Once you bring the truck back to the parking lot, you're good to go for the rest of the day, unless there's some reason you would need to come in. But generally, whatever you need to return, we have a mailbox out front that you could just leave the stuff in. The nice thing too about the delivery service is we don't have the burden for safety reasons and convenience and time. The drivers are never responsible for collecting payment from the customer. So we try to make the delivery as contactless as possible. The driver themselves won't often have much of a reason to engage with the customer. They should be in and out pretty quickly, particularly when they leave their bottles out. It's really only when they don't leave their bottles out, or if there's an office, that you would need to engage with the customer. But if you think this career makes sense for you, or if you're interested in learning more about the business, we'd appreciate, you know, if you express your interest in working for us. If we think you are a fit for us and you think we are a fit for you, that's fantastic. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, comment with any questions. We love hearing from our customers or even potential employees. We're always working as a business to make the driver experience that much better, but, you know, we created this video to give some perspective for newer drivers and our customers as to what the driver goes through on a daily basis, because it's not an easy job. They are putting in a ton of effort, they're putting in a ton of energy, and it can be exhausting. You know, we wanted to kind of highlight that and appreciate everything that the driver's done.